A US federal judge has dismissed a lawsuit against Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman for his role in ordering the assassination and dismemberment of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Now, the judge argued that the country's new prime minister happens to be MBS. And since he is the new prime minister, which happened just recently, by the way, he has head of state immunity when it comes to this type of litigation. Now, did it have to play out this way? No. In reality, this federal judge is taking orders from the State Department and the Biden administration. Let me tell you how. Now, in his decision to dismiss the lawsuit, Judge John D. Bates of the US District Court for DC said this: "The United States has informed the court that he, meaning MBS, is immune, and Mohammed is therefore entitled to head of state immunity while he remains in office." Oh, that's fascinating. Well, among those who labeled MBS immune was the Biden administration. And how did they do it? What's the argument here? Last month, the Biden administration determined that Mohammed was immune from the suit brought forth in 2020 by Khashoggi's fiance and the civil rights organization he founded before his death, known as Dawn, given his appointment as sitting head of government. Now, on September 27th, Mohammed bin Salman was named prime minister by his father, King Salman. King Salman. So King Salman is still alive and well, and that's important for you to remember as we continue. Just 6 days before the US State Department's court-imposed deadline to determine whether MBS was protected from legal action. Now, that declaration of immunity, by the way, didn't need to happen, right? The Biden administration is, first of all, throwing the State Department under the bus. They're like, no, it wasn't up to, it was the State Department. They made the determination. We'd like to distance ourselves from this, okay? Because yeah, it's kind of embarrassing. Biden said he was gonna make MBS a pariah for ordering the assassination and dismemberment of Jamal Khashoggi. And then he turned around and provided cover for the Saudis. It's a little embarrassing. So we're just going to say it was the State Department. Okay, but it's not like there are these set in stone rules in regard to who you declare as heads of state, because we have some pretty recent examples of the United States referring to individuals who are not heads of state as heads of state, like Juan Guaido in Venezuela. The United States, both under the Trump administration and the Biden administration, decided to declare a man who was never elected in Venezuela as the head of state. Fascinating, right? Now, in the case of Mohammed bin Salman, sure, he's now been named the prime minister, but they still got the king, who's the actual head of state in Saudi Arabia. So let me give you some details on that. In the weeks before the decision, the White House's National Security Council privately met with Democracy in the Arab World Now, or DAWN. Again, that's the advocacy group we were telling you about earlier that was founded by Khashoggi, and a plaintiff in the lawsuit against MBF. Now, expressly to discuss the immunity question, the National Security Council, I should say, went so far as to ask the group to write a memo making the argument for denying immunity, suggesting that White House officials were, along with the state, weighing the merits of the case. So like they didn't even know whether this argument that MBS is the head of state and should be immune, they didn't know if that argument would really stand. So they went to the very individuals who have filed this lawsuit, who are plaintiffs in the lawsuit, and they're like, so could you write us a memo and tell us why you think MBS is not immune? Just let us know what your arguments are. Now, MBS was not and is not the head of state, and it shouldn't matter anyway. He assassinated someone in one of the most vicious ways and then proceeded to have his henchmen dismember Jamal Khashoggi. The request for sovereign immunity was a ploy, Don wrote, laying out a simple argument. Head of state immunity is typically reserved for a country's leader, which in the case of Saudi Arabia is its king, Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, MBS's father, with a very lengthy name. Now, King Salman, senior to Crown Prince Mohammed, is head of state. There can't be two heads of state. Seems like the Biden administration, the State Department under the Biden administration, just arbitrarily decided to declare MBS head of state so they can say he's immune from the lawsuit. That's what actually happened. And I'll tell you why in just a moment, but a few more details. And keep in mind, look, the Biden administration has discretion, okay? I gave you the example of Venezuela. That continues to be an issue. They keep referring to individuals who have not been elected in places like Venezuela as the actual leaders of countries. And here's another example. Let's go to graphic 6 here. So Bashar Assad would get the similar immunity, a journalist asked, referring to Syria's president who has presided over countless atrocities during the Syrian civil war. I suspect not, replied State Department spokesperson Vedant Patel. But Bashar Assad literally is the head of state. He doesn't get to enjoy immunity, but MBS does, and he's not even the head of state? So why go out of your way to provide immunity and protections for a man who viciously slaughtered a Washington Post journalist? Why? Well, of course, there are economic issues at play here. In a lengthy piece written by Politico magazine, there was a short mention, but I think it's important to keep an eye on this, about supply chain issues that we've experienced with China during the coronavirus pandemic. Apparently, the business community thinks that we would be better suited to shift some of our supply chain to Saudi Arabia rather than continue working with China. I think that's a story that will develop further in future months, possibly years, especially as hostilities with China unfortunately continue to increase because of the hostile commentary and discourse we're seeing from our politicians. But there are other reasons as well. I had mentioned oil earlier, and I think that's relevant. Now, Saudi Arabia admits that they asked for immunity and they did get their way, right? Two sources close to members of the Saudi royal family and administration confirmed to The Intercept that Saudi had asked the Biden administration to grant MBS immunity. At the same time, the US wanted the kingdom to, oh, would you look at that? Turn up oil production. We want their oil. Business community wants to shift some manufacturing, production, and supply chain components over to Saudi Arabia, so we don't work with China as much anymore. Seems like it's the same old, same old. We experienced this quite a bit here in the United States with domestic policy, profits over people. And even when it comes to international decisions, foreign policy, it's the same thinking, the same rationale. Yeah, I mean, they murdered a US citizen and a Washington Post journalist. And Biden did say that he was gonna make MBS a pariah for doing it, but then there's the economic interests at play. So we gotta do something about that. That's really what's going on here. And it's so incredibly disgusting to see it play out the way it's been playing out. And the cowardice that you're seeing from the Biden administration to just pass the buck. It was the State Department. Have the courage to at least be honest with the American people, and particularly the individuals who voted for you. Let them know, yeah, I actually thought one thing on the debate stage when I said that I would make MBS a pariah. But then once I remembered that business interests and economic interests would come into play, I changed my mind. Just be honest about it. I would at least respect Biden if he had the courage to just tell us the truth. Instead, pointing fingers over to the State Department as if you're not the commander in chief is ridiculous and cowardly, to say the least. It also doesn't help the matter. What also doesn't help the matter is the fact that there is involvement of Biden's Middle East envoy in this whole situation, someone who should not be part of his Middle East envoy at all. His name is Brett McGurk. And apparently he loves Saudi Arabia. Many see Biden's Middle East envoy, Brett McGurk, as too soft on the Saudis. McGurk has been a reliable proponent of warm relations with Saudi Arabia under every presidential administration, going back to that of George W. Bush. Why is this guy who was employed under the Bush administration now serving under the Biden administration? And why does he seem to have a bit of a love affair with the Saudis? Maybe we should look into that a little bit. What's motivating his love for Saudi Arabia? I think that's relevant to the story. I would have liked to see news outlets dig into that a little bit. Now, a senior congressional aide spoke to HuffPost about McGurk specifically. This is from a piece that was written in October of this year. And here's what they said. It is absolutely ridiculous that the White House and the president himself still puts faith in Brett McGurk for a strategy and set of policies that have failed to deliver for the United States and its interests. The idea that the US-Saudi relationship not only needs to be reevaluated but significantly reset is now not only a progressive left thing, but Democratic Party orthodoxy. McGurk has fought this at every turn, is trapped in the past, and should no longer be serving this administration. That was a senior congressional aide. We don't know who that aide was because they spoke on the condition of anonymity. But I agree with what that individual said wholeheartedly. That guy right beside me, this McGurk character, clearly has a bias that is unhealthy in terms of making decisions about foreign policy. I don't know what's motivating him. I don't know if there's money involved, no idea. But it is strange that we are currently dealing with a Democratic administration that is providing cover, literally protecting through immunity, a man who ordered the assassination and dismemberment of a Washington Post journalist. We were very harsh toward Donald Trump for providing cover, and he certainly did the same. I'm not gonna play patty cakes with the Biden administration when they're doing the exact same thing. It's disgusting.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.